I'm from United Neighbors of Fall River. We're an organization that does a lot of peace initiatives here in town. Some of you might have been in our Peace by Peace Summit. Many of you passed by the Peace Pole outside in Durfee, and that's because of our agency as well. And today we're here with Durfee students that we've been working with on the Youth Violence Prevention Task Force. I'd like to introduce my colleagues that are with me. This is Elizabeth Malkin, and I don't know where Brittany went. Brittany's over there. Okay, Brittany and Elizabeth. Elizabeth is our Life Together Fellow, and Brittany is our AmeriCorps. Both of them, when they graduated college, decided to donate a year of their life to the Fall River community, working on peace initiatives. So they've been with us for the year, and they have helped put together the Youth Violence Prevention Task Force. We have Louis, we have Patrick, and we have Abe, and I'm going to turn the program over to them.
How are you?
Great.
All right, so the first thing we're going to be doing today is we're going to tell you a story about a 28-year-old who goes by the name Kitty Genovese. In 1964, she was walking home when she had reached the courtyard of her apartment complex. She was in the middle, so the courtyard's like right in the center, and then there are 6 apartment buildings surrounding the courtyard. So there's 2 in the middle, and then there's 2 on each side. And as she reached that courtyard, a man who had been stalking her the entire time approached her and stabbed her. When he had finished stabbing her, he left for about a period of 5-10 minutes, returned, stabbed her again, left, and this process repeated for over half an hour. By the time the half hour had passed, he finally came back for the final time and murdered Kitty Genovese in full view of 38 people. During this entire time, only one person spoke up and said, "Leave that girl alone." Other than that, nobody else had spoken up or done anything to protect Kitty Genovese.
All the excuses that these people gave were, "Oh, I don't want to be court involved. What if I go outside and someone sees me and pinpoints me as a suspect? Or, you know, what if I go out and the killer comes back and stabs me?" These are all, yeah, somewhat valid excuses, but I wouldn't. I'd go out and I'd help them. I know that. But there were other factors that implied, and I'm going to turn it over to Abe.
Before you know, the one person that did want to go out?
There was one person that was going to go out, but their wife stopped them, and her quote was, "I don't want to be a hero's widow."
And like, as ridiculous as these excuses sound, no one at this time had a cell phone, and I know how many people have a cell phone? Raise your hand. Yeah, so almost everyone. So no one had a cell phone. There was no such thing as 911. If you wanted to call the police, you would have to dial the number. They would send you to an operator. The operator would call someone else, and it would just be a lengthy process that took too long. And it wasn't like quick like that to call 911. So yeah, there's just no quick way of calling the police.
And the aftermath of it was, first of all, she was stabbed. She was stabbed over a 30-minute time period. But there's that one 10-minute time period where no one did anything. He left. The body was there. She was bleeding out, and I mean, she was still alive. She called a man by name who ignored her. He watched her and shut his blinds the second his name was uttered. And I mean, how many of you, all right, raise your hand, would save a family member? All right, how many of you would put your life on the line in case there was a stranger? So you have no reputation, you have nothing, you have no knowledge of them, but you would still save them. All right, and let's say you can't swim. How many of you would would save a person who is drowning and you can't swim? All right, that's pretty impressive.
I think one of the things that came out of this Kitty Genovese story was the term bystander became part of our vocabulary. And this was in the 1960s. And before that, although the word existed, it wasn't part of the vernacular, the language that we use every day and that we talk with. Because people were absolutely horrified by the fact that it took a half an hour for Kitty to be killed. There was a 10-minute period where her murderer retreated, and as Louis said, she was bleeding out in full view of these 38 people. She actually recognized one person by name and asked him to help her, and he closed his blind, and no one did anything. When they caught the killer, they said to him, "Why did you come back after you stabbed her? Why did you wait 10 minutes and come back again? Weren't you afraid you were going to get caught?" And you know what he said? "I knew no one would do nothing." That's what he said. No one would do nothing. So it's incredible that this has come to represent being a bystander, the person who stands by and lets it happen and takes no action to make things better. So this is our connection to bullying. So that's what our presentation today is about, is talking a little bit about bullying and the role of bystanders in bullying. So I'm going to turn it back to the guys, and they're going to talk to you a little bit about the characteristics of what we think is bullying.
All right, so the next thing we're going to work on is the bullying chart, which is on page 2 of the packets that we handed out. Feel free to jot down anything that you would like to, or at the end of this period, you can just hand the packet back to us. Let's do whatever you'd like to do. The first topic that we're going to be talking about on the bullying chart is imbalance of power. Imbalance of power is when somebody has an assumed superiority over another person, such as a person might be stronger than another person, they might have more money than another person, might be smarter. That person makes them feel better than somebody else because the other person is unmatched in that perspective. And so an example of that would be, the school example of that would be, so a new kid, say he's like a sophomore, a kid transfers from school in the sophomore year, and he's just walking to school when he encounters a group of popular seniors. These seniors automatically see the kid and decide that they want to pick on him because they're smarter than him, they're older, they have more knowledge, and they have friends. This kid is lonely and has no clue about the school. They don't really know about his educational background, but they just assume that in pretty much any factor that they can find, they're better than this kid, and they're determined to use that against him.
Okay. After imbalance of power, we have intent to harm.
All right, so intent to harm. Intent to harm is basically when a bully emotionally or physically causes violence toward another person. An example of this would be in a school. A school example would be kind of like what Patrick said, like a new kid, and then this a person from the clique decides to start a rumor about them, and it just spreads and spreads until that new kid feels completely trashed and just made fun of, terrible.
So after intent to harm, we move to threat of more aggression. How does that play out?
A threat of more aggression is when both the bully and the bullied person know that most likely and probably this will continue on, and it'll go from the minor threats and pushing to major threats and actually hurting them. And the actual school's example we had was that the clique is now threatening this person, telling them to watch their back, or you'll be sorry you came to this school, you'll be sorry you transferred here, and they just start abusing him, and that leads into Lewis's category, terror.
Terror now, basically, the person's scared. They're scared to go to school. They don't want to deal with the bullying anymore. They're terrified. Think of it this way. Gillette Stadium, think of that 5 times. The amount of people filled to the brim. As many people as you can fit, 5 times. That's how many kids stay home on average a day because they're too scared of being bullied. And this is only on record. Non-record, it can break the chart.
So 180,000. That's Gillette Stadium filled more than 5 times with Patriots. 80,000 children are afraid to walk into their school every single day because they're afraid of being bullied. So bullying doesn't just take place in your school. It takes place out of the school too. So now we're going to look at the same characteristics and see how they impact on our community.
Walking down a road when a group of guys, 4 or 5 guys, turns around the corner, and now they're walking a bunch, and all of a sudden they see her, and they start to spread out, and now they're actually watching her. They're starting to use their motions and gestures to make her afraid of them. Now they're using their numbers and their strength to intimidate her, and now she's feeling like she's inferior because there's nothing that she could do to stop whatever they plan on doing unless she can scream. But other than that, they have the physical power over her, and they also have the numbers advantage on her.
How many of you have ever been afraid to walk in the street by yourself? At night, at day, Fall River, New Bedford, New York, anywhere.
I know a group of guys who are walking around and they find this really vulnerable girl just sitting around. So some ways to harm her would be if they just start like teasing her, catcalling her, like just calling her like touching her uncomfortably, making her feel like really, really uncomfortable. And it's something serious that's happening to a lot of people around the world now. And like the group of men want to make the girl feel really uncomfortable, really hurt.
Good job. Okay, now we move on to threat of more aggression, Christian.
Putting more aggression in this situation actually is the men start following the woman. They could follow her home, or if they see her in the city again, they stalk her around the city. They end up, eventually they could end up finding out where she lives. And it also comes in forms of threats, like, oh, you better watch yourself, we know who you are, type thing. We'll find you, and many other threats. And then it also gets physical, where they start touching the girl in areas she'd be uncomfortable with,
Okay, so that leads us to,
The terror basically, she just doesn't want to leave the house. She's scared to the point where if she's going to go out, the group of guys is just going to continue with what they've been doing.
I go to a lot of community meetings and speak to a lot of residents of Fall River. And over and over again, I hear from elderly people, from young mothers with children that are single parents, that they are afraid to go out into the street. They're afraid to let their kids play outside. And a lot of times they say things like, oh, they're gangbangers in the next block, or there are kids wearing colors over here, or there's drug dealing going on 2 houses down. But think for a minute what it's like to grow up and be afraid to go out on the streets. That is bullying. So here's the big question. What happens to a bully when they graduate high school? Do they stop being a bully? Do you hear about bullying problems in college? No. So what happens to those bullies? They do it to their kids. Very often that happens. Lots and lots of child abusers were bullies in high school. That's a great example. But they also move on to much bigger positions. So let's think about what's going on in the world. Let's see who's up with current events. Tell me about a bully right now, globally.
Well, this is like really,
Say it.
it's really
North Korea. We're gonna go with his answer. North Korea. Why is he a bully? First characteristic, okay? Imbalance of power. What's the imbalance of power in North Korea?
They have nuclear weapons.
They have nuclear weapons. What's the intent to harm in North Korea?
They want to bomb the United States.
They want to bomb the United States. You're on a roll. What's the threat of more aggression? What did he do that scared the bejeebies out of everybody? Say it. They launched a nuclear bomb. What's the terror? You live 3 miles away in South Korea, and the maniac 3 miles away is letting loose nuclear bombs. Is that going to make you a little terrified? Yeah, I'd say so. I'd say so. And actually, what's making it a little less stressful is the fact that the launch of the nuclear bomb wasn't as successful as it could have been. But let's take it back to history. Let's talk a little bit about the time during the Second World War that we refer to as the Holocaust. Okay, what's the imbalance of power during the Holocaust? Who had power?
Germans.
Nazis. What was their, how did you know they had intent to harm? What did they do that told us intent to harm?
Jews.
Before they put them in concentration camps, what did they do?
Put them in ghettos.
They put them in ghettos. They segregated them and made them live separately. They made them wear yellow stars so that they were identified as Jews. And by the way, we talk about the 6 million Jews that were killed. Please be aware that Hitler targeted 11 million people. 3 million gypsies. He pretty much wiped out the entire gypsy population and culture. GLBTQ, clergymen who spoke out against the Nazis, newspaper reporters who spoke out, political people who spoke out. He targeted 11 million people. These are not people that were soldiers or people that were in cities that were bombed in the wrong place at the wrong time. These were people who were targeted because of who they were and what they believed. Okay? So, what was the threat of more aggression? What was the next things? After ghettos, where did the Jews get sent? Concentration camps. Okay, so we see that whole same continuum of bullying happens with genocide. Now, we started talking about bystanders. Now we're going to talk about the opposite of a bystander. What's the opposite of a bystander? I heard someone say it. An upstander. Somebody who stands up. And the guys are going to tell you one of my favorite upstander stories. Okay? Upstander story. Go ahead.
So basically, guys, the story we're going to be talking about is basically a story of a bunch of people who saw these other groups of people being bullied, and instead of being bystanders and just letting it go, they decided to be upstanders and help these people out and stand up.
This is a true event that happened during World War II, during the Holocaust. In Denmark, there was a quite large population of Jewish citizens, and the Denmark officials were notified that the Nazi army was actually coming to take the Jewish citizens away to concentration camps. The Jewish officials, the Denmark officials and citizens decided to get together and figure out a way to get these Jews to a safe place. They all came up with the idea, we need to get them to a neutral land. But then they came up with the problem, how do we do it? And they all came together and they all thought, let's do it by boat. Sweden's right across the channel, you know. So what they did was they used commercial fishing vessels. I don't know if you guys have ever seen like the show Deadliest Catch. They have that big tank in the middle of the boat. They stashed the Jewish people in there, and the Denmark scientists developed a type of drug to numb the noses of the dogs that were used to search these vessels so they couldn't detect the Jewish population that was hidden inside. After the boats were searched, they were usually sent on their way. Sometimes they'd be searched to a little more extent, but for the most part, these boats all went on their way, and over 8,000, or just about 8,000 people were saved, and that's Jewish population and their families.
All right, so what we're about to recount to you is a quote by a 17-year-old so he's about our age at this time, named Brittany Nielsen. He was one of the rescuers who took part in the rescue at Denmark, and he pretty much put his life on the line. And anybody who took part in this rescue, if they were caught, they would be tortured and eventually put to death. So if you could all just flip to the last page in your packets and follow along with me on the Danish upstander story, right in the middle you'll see a quote, and that's what I'm about to read, which is the reason why Brittany Nielsen did what he did. And it says, you can't let people in need down. You can't turn your back to people who need your help. There must be some sort of decency in a man's life, and that wouldn't have been decent to turn your back. So there's no question of why or why not. You just did. That's the way you're brought up. That's the way of tradition in my country. You help, of course. Could you have retained your self-respect if you knew that these people would suffer and you had said, no, not at my table? No, no way. So that's not a problem. You just have to do it and nothing else. So what he's saying is he was brought up in an environment where if you saw somebody who was in trouble, you saw somebody who needed help, you would help them no matter the cost to you, no matter where that person was. You would just have to help them because that was just the right thing to do. That's just the way he was raised up. And now I'll hand it over to Lucas.
And what happened after this was there was a German naval attaché who was George Duckwitz, who leaked out every single Nazi plan to the Danes. And basically this saved millions of lives because King Christian X, what he then later did was wear gold stars. Him and everyone in Denmark, not just a few people, like everyone. And it confused the Nazis. They had no idea who should they deport, who should they send to the concentration camps, who is actually a Jew. They had no way of telling how. This saved exactly so many lives that if you were to look on a map where, like in Russia, you have over like 50,000 deaths. And in like Germany, you have millions of deaths. If you look at Denmark, there's literally below 1%, which is hardly any deaths. And on the World War II thing, it's always good to be an upstander But on the extreme side, I had a great-grandfather who participated in World War II, and he held at gunpoint, right to his head. They knocked on his door and said, if you don't join the Nazi army, you're going to be shot dead. So he joins, but he gets sick of it. So in an attempt to speak out against it, he was shot 6 times and left for dead. Now, I'm not saying that in Germany you're going to get shot 6 times because you're trying to help a kid being bullied. I'm just saying that there's always the extreme, but you should never worry about it because it's much more important to help other people.
So let's raise our hands for a second, okay? How many of you would put your life at risk to save a member of your family? Put your hand in the air. Keep your hands up. Put your hand down if you don't agree with the following statement. I would risk my life to help a friend. Put your hand down if you don't agree with the following statement. I would risk my life to help a neighbor. Put your hand down if you don't agree with the following statement. I would risk my life to help someone I don't know. Okay, so being able to, you put your hands down. Being able to put your life at risk for the sake of someone else's life is pretty intense. Now let's do the same exercise on something else. How many of you would put your reputation at stake to help a member of your family?
Reputation.
How many of you would put your reputation at stake to help a friend? Some people are going like this. Make a decision. How many of you would put your reputation at stake to help a classmate? A classmate, someone you go to school. How many of you would put your reputation at stake to help someone you don't know? Okay? So, is it easy to be an upstander? No, it's really hard. And a lot of times being an upstander means standing up against your friends, doing something that your peer group might not be part of. I understand here at Durfee that there is a mechanism if you want to be an upstander. And the mechanism is to go to an adult or an adjustment counselor. And I've been told that they guarantee that your confidentiality is kept, so that you have the ability to make a change without putting yourself in the line of fire. Think back to Kitty Genovese. One of the big excuses that people gave for not standing up and saying anything when she was being brutally murdered over a 30-minute period was they didn't want to get involved because they didn't want anything to fall back on them. I'm telling you that being an upstander is being able to say, you know what? There might be ramifications, just like the 17-year-old that Patrick told us about. There might be ramifications. But sometimes I recognize that it's the right thing to do, even if everybody else doesn't recognize it.
If I could just say something, like she was mentioned about 17-year-olds, he had 2 choices to make, and these were his choice to make. He wasn't forced. He did get paid. There was nothing to benefit him besides helping out people. Here were his choices. Sit back at home, not risk his life at all, and just go on living knowing that he's not going to help out in rescuing over 7,000 lives. Or go on, help 7,000 lives, or over 7,000 people, and possibly get captured, tortured, and killed. He chose, out of his own decision, out of his own will, to go and help the people, risking anything. And like I said, a lot of us are around 16, 17 years old. I really don't know how easy that would be for me to decide if I could, at 17 years old, knowing that I still have the rest of my life ahead of me, just to be like, just to help other people, knowing that I still have like, God knows how many years ahead of me to live.
Well, I'm surprised you say that because you're a member of the ROTC, are you not?
Yeah.
And I see we have a number of members of the ROTC here. By nature, that's what you do. You put your life at risk for the sake sometimes of people you don't even know. And that's a really extreme position. And you choose to do that. Okay, you made the choice to be part of that, knowing that that's probably what the future's going to bring. But you can make the choice right here, right now, today at Durfee High School to stop being a bystander and to become an upstander. To recognize that sometimes people that are bullied, they're good people. They're in the wrong place, at the wrong time, the wrong color, the wrong religion, the wrong gender, the wrong class, the wrong amount of money, the wrong clothing, the wrong way they wear their hair, and other people make fun of them simply because of that. And you could do two things. You can walk away and let it happen, and the world will continue. Or you can be an upstander, and you can decide it ends here. Because you understand that if it doesn't end here, those people become Kim Jong-un, Adolf Hitler, Mussolini, Saddam Hussein, Yasser Arafat. They become megalomaniacs, and they run their countries and their organizations with that same characteristics to bully. So, do you guys have anything else before the big quote at the end? Anything else you want to add?
Well, people who get bullied can become Bill Gates.
People who get bullied can become Bill Gates. I always say this very often when I used to teach. Shh, you guys, not nice. Be nice. Very often when I used to teach, kids that were not in the popular group, but were more interested in other endeavors, a lot of times kids that were very interested when computers were first coming out, they would bemoan the fact that they were bullied a lot. But then I would tell them, look and see where Bill Gates is today. The very kids you bully today might end up being the very people you work for later on.
And saying instead of working with his people, so he changed that whole perspective into helping his people. No, it wasn't easy, but he showed that we have to stand up for who we are, what we are, and the right thing.
Absolutely. So what Kiki said is that sometimes you have to stand up for who you are, what you are, but the most importantly is because you know it's the right thing to do. During the Second World War, there was a Protestant minister named Reverend Martin Nemo. And he has this great quote that I talk to kids about all the time. He said, when they came for the communists, I didn't say anything because I wasn't a communist. And when they came for the socialists, I didn't say anything because I wasn't a socialist. And when they came for the trade unionists, I didn't say anything because I wasn't a trade unionist. And when they came for the Jews, I didn't say anything because I wasn't a Jew. And when they came for me, there was nobody left to speak out. You have the power. You have the power to speak out. You have the power to change the world right here in Durban, in your communities, and in the world. All you have to do is recognize how to do the right thing. Don't be a bystander. Be an upstander. Change the way things happen. Big thanks to our... I just want to acknowledge Christian, Patrick, Abe, and Louis for all their work as part of the Youth Violence Prevention Task Force. Patrick wants to give us a little words to end up on.
Well, I'm just going to say this. At the end of the program, when the bell rings, I'll be standing by the door. Anybody who doesn't want their package, just give it to me. Don't throw it out, so that way...
Yeah, we'd appreciate it if you would look at it. The Kitty Genevieve story is in it, and the Danish Jew story is in it. We're happy for you to take it. You can't leave the room till the bell rings. Thanks for your time. Now that... And which with you? Youth Violence Prevention Task Force. Good experience?
Great experience.
I had a fun time.
Will you do it again?
Yes.
And what do
I'll
you tell
definitely
other
back
students
next
about
year.
it?
Join the Youth Violence Prevention Task Force.